Earlier this week, as you know, US President Donald Trump announced he had instructed his administration to halt funding to the World Health Organization. Now, the US contributes just under 15% of the total budget for the organisation. That's $400 million from the US. And their contribution dwarfs places like China, $87 million from China, not much more than we here in Australia contribute, $66 million from Australia. So it begs the question, doesn't it, whether Australia should follow the US and freeze our funding of the World Health Organization. Now, the government's already ruled that out, at least thus far they have, but I want to know what you think. So via Facebook, we asked you the question. Boy, you didn't hold back. Here's some of what you had to say. Vanessa Downham writes, absolutely, why is our WHO funding over $60 million given our comparatively small population? Peter McWatters says yes, until a full investigation has been completed into why they failed the world so monumentally, we also need to reassess how much we can afford. Sandra Bella Levinston writes, most definitely freeze the funding. They're staffed by unelected bureaucrats who are enjoying a never-ending, self-indulgent party. Ivan Urix says yes, is a waste of good money, spending it on pampered, useless bureaucrats, bit of a theme there, when those same funds can be used in Australian healthcare. Charmaine Brintelli comments, yes, freeze our funding until they reform to our satisfaction. That is, they should meet their obligations to the entire world, not just the countries they favour. Chris Kaleo says, don't just freeze it. We need every bit of our funds to get our economy back running when this is over. Sorry, other countries, but we need to look after Aussies first. Joining me now, Sky News contributor, long-time radio broadcaster and my very good friend Jane Marwick from Perth. Tell you what.
Hello, Peter.
Pretty clear view from the community.
Yeah, and they're right too. Given the extenuating circumstances, given the people who can't get job seeker or job keeper, who are getting angrier and angrier by the day, who are really missing out, I take the Prime Minister's point that the WHO does very important work in the Pacific region, but there has to be another way that our nation can help the Pacific region at the moment. I'm not saying cut it off forever. I'm with President Trump, and I'm a bit like you on Trump too. Sometimes I roll my eyes, but on this one, I punched the air with joy. I thought, had China been honest, Peter, had they told us what was going on, what they knew, rather than this veil of secrecy, we might all be a little more forgiving. And I note that today they've upped the number of deaths in Wuhan to 4,000. Well, we know, given the counting of urns, it's more like 42,000. So more transparency there. And I fully support the idea that we freeze our funding of the World Health Organization until it gets its house in order with regards to China. Now, that's not leaving the door open for China to have further control of the World Health Organization and the Pacific region, but we're a smart country and there has to be a better way for us to help our neighbours whilst not funding this organisation while it continues to behave so reprehensibly.
And look, China, look at those numbers again, $87 million from China, 66 from us. China doesn't control the World Health Organization by virtue of how much it funds this particular global body. What it does is it preferences the people running the organisation. In this case, the head, the Director General, is an Ethiopian, and there's literally billions of dollars being spent in Ethiopia. And they use the political influence of the infrastructure spending, the Belt and Road Initiative, which Daniel Andrews in Victoria, I might add, has signed up to. The country hasn't. No other state has. That's their modus operandi. But I want to go back to something you just said. You talked about people not getting JobKeeper, which is the employer payment, but also not being eligible for Job Seeker. Now, I had Peter Strong on the show last night. He's the head of the Small Business Lobby. He's saying that there are a lot of dictatorial, particularly casual, particularly young people, making it so in relation to JobKeeper that some of his small business operators are saying, you know what, I mightn't even go into this. I might not get involved in this scheme. Now, the problem with the dole payment, the Job Seeker, is a lot of people might think they would be eligible, Jane, but they won't be, will they?
No, they will not be, because if your partner earns $79,880, that cancels you out. So it's means tested. Now, there are lots of issues, and I saw Peter Strong, and hasn't he been a terrific advocate for small business? I saw Peter Strong, and I asked small business people that I've been dealing with in the last 24 hours since I saw that, and they said, yes, there are issues with employees. I was staggered when he said that if you've got an employee who only works on a Saturday under JobKeeper, that you can still only ask them to work on a Saturday and yet they get the $750. I was speaking to employers who said, yes, they've had that issue where employees say, I'll have the $750 a week, I'm entitled to JobKeeper, so I'll have that $750, but I'm not coming into the workplace. Now, as Peter Strong pointed out, some workplaces are undertaking renovations. It's a good opportunity to train. So there are some employees who are doing the wrong thing who think that they're entitled, and that's very off-putting for employers. However, there are still employers, and I'll give you an example of a hairdresser that I know who said he's telling his staff to take job seeker at the moment because he's got all of his own costs. He's carrying something like $17,000 worth of product that he can't shift on his credit card. He's still paying his rent. He cannot afford to pay JobKeeper at the moment. So all of these people who constantly look down the barrel of these cameras, these, you know, people who've been fed this bunkum by bureaucrats saying, oh, just go to your bank and get a loan. Well, if you're already up to your eyeballs in debt, and if your interest has been deferred, and you then go back to your bank and ask for more money until the 1st of May, that's, for many, many small business people, that's fairyland. I spoke to another business operator yesterday who had 7 staff, Peter. He's down to 2. Now, his staff told him they couldn't get job seeker. And I think that, and it looked clever at the time calling them job keeper and job seeker, but some of them are saying that they've been on the phone to Centrelink for 4 hours, and I think that they're confused whether or not they're asking for job keeper or job seeker, and they're being turned away. One guy told me that his wife works in childcare. She earns $50,000 a year. He's a cabinet maker. He's been told he doesn't qualify for job seeker. So he's scratching around. He's on $300 a week. So there is an enormous amount of confusion.
This is a big problem, and of course everybody sitting in Canberra, every single person involved in making the decision, from the person answering the phone in the Prime Minister's office to the senior bureaucrats to the Prime Minister to his staff, they've all got their jobs. They're all guaranteed to keep their jobs. They're all guaranteed to have their salaries, and every single one of their salaries, broadly speaking, I know there's a freeze on some increases, but broadly speaking, across the board, their pay will continue to go up. So they don't live in the real world. They do not live in the real world, and I think there is a lot of confusion about these 2 payments and the fact that employers have to carry the costs until such time as they get down in May and can get reimbursed. Well, that's a big cash flow issue, as you've just highlighted. I want to ask you about this app. It sounded when it was first talked about, this is the app that we can all download, and if we end up sitting next to someone for a period of time who has coronavirus, we'll be alerted that we should get a test. Now, it all sounded lovely when it was, we'd like you to have this app, please think about downloading it, but it's now sort of maybe could be mandatory.
Yeah, this is not the People's Republic of China, and I noted that the Prime Minister said this is some kind of national service. Well, I would like to point out that many of us are already doing our national service. We've taken tremendous hits to our incomes. We are staying at home as best we can and self-isolating. A lot of Australians are doing the right thing, and willingly so. Willingly so. But please do not consider making an app that traces our movements. And I know I was listening to the cybersecurity specialists about it today. It mightn't be as insidious as it first seems, but please keep this optional. I think in Singapore the take-up's been about 12%. Well, so be it. Australians are doing their level best. Do not impose this on Australians. They will get so-called burner phones, or they will leave them at home. And while there is so much goodwill for federal and state governments at the moment and the measures they are taking, these are the kind of measures, Peter, that will very quickly turn the populace against you. Ask Australians to do it. If they want to, they will. I certainly will not be doing it. And I'm generally speaking no great fan of Edward Snowden, but he has been bang on about this. We might trust our Prime Minister now and our bureaucrats now, and Anthony Albanese now. But what about the next lot?
Yeah, well, you're right,
it's a
Jane.
no from me, and I don't want them having my data.
Well said. I think that this will be discussed very much in coming days. Got to leave it there. Jane Marwick, as always, great to have you on the show. See you next Friday.